The morning started like any other Tuesday in our modest two-bedroom apartment in Lahore. The familiar sounds of my mother humming old Lata Mangeshkar songs while preparing breakfast drifted through the thin walls, mixing with the distant call to prayer from the neighborhood mosque. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it made its lazy rotations, contemplating another day of pretending everything was normal. But nothing about our family had ever been normal, not really. I was 23 years old, and for as long as I could remember, there had been an invisible wall between my mother and me. Not the kind built from anger or resentment, but something more subtle, a careful distance, a measured politeness that felt more like dealing with a distant relative than a daughter. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was, in fact, her daughter, but somehow the title had never quite translated into the warm, unconditional bond one saw between other mothers and their daughters. My name is Aisha, and I was born to parents who had desperately wanted a son. In Pakistan, this isn't an uncommon story. The pressure to produce male heirs runs deep in our culture, woven into the very fabric of our society. My father, a successful businessman, had been the youngest of 4 brothers, and his own father had made it abundantly clear that the family legacy rested on his shoulders. When my mother gave birth to me, a girl, the disappointment was palpable enough to cut through the joy of new parenthood. "We'll try again," my grandmother had said, not even bothering to lower her voice. "Next time, inshallah, it will be a boy." But there was no next time. Complications during my birth had left my mother unable to have more children, a fact that she carried like a stone in her heart, and that my father's family never let her forget. I grew up knowing I was a consolation prize, a runner-up in the race for parental approval. My mother loved me, I never doubted that, but there was always a melancholy to her love, a sense that I was a reminder of what she couldn't give my father. She would sometimes look at me, and I could see the calculation in her eyes, the mental rearrangement of features that would have made me a son instead of a daughter. The house was filled with pictures of my father's brother's sons, my cousins, but there wasn't a single framed photograph of me anywhere in the living room. It was a small thing, but I noticed. "You're a smart girl," my mother would say when I brought home excellent grades. "You could be anything you want to be." It was meant as encouragement, but I always heard the unspoken ending. "If only you had been born a boy." So I learned to make myself small. I learned to be grateful for scraps of attention, to accept the distance as normal, to never ask for more than what was offered. I buried my need for maternal warmth so deep that eventually I convinced myself I didn't need it at all. But that Tuesday, everything changed. I remember the exact moment, 9:47 a.m., because I had glanced at the alarm clock while trying to muster the energy to get out of bed. My mother knocked softly on my door, a formality she'd observed my entire life, as if entering my room without permission would violate some boundary she'd carefully constructed. "Aisha Beta, are you awake?" Her voice was softer than usual, almost hesitant. "Gee, Ammi, I'm up," I called back, sitting up and running my fingers through my tangled hair. When she opened the door, I noticed something different about her immediately. She was wearing the green silk shalwar kameez that she usually saved for weddings and Eid, and her gray-streaked hair was freshly oiled and braided. Her face, usually expressionless behind a mask of polite indifference, was animated with something I couldn't quite identify. "Come to the kitchen when you're ready," she said. "I've made your favorite, halwa puri." I blinked, sure I'd misheard. Halwa puri was a special occasion breakfast, not something for a random Tuesday. And my favorite? Since when did my mother know what my favorite anything was? "Okay," I managed, my voice coming out smaller than intended. By the time I had washed my face and changed into a clean suit, my mind was racing with possibilities. What was happening? Was someone coming to visit? Had something happened to my father? Was she sick? The thoughts tumbled over each other in a chaotic rush. When I walked into the kitchen, the scene that greeted me was so surreal I had to stop and blink. Our small kitchen table, usually cluttered with bills and whatever random items my mother had set down, was covered with a fresh tablecloth I'd never seen before. There were flowers in the center, real flowers, not the plastic ones that decorated the living room. And the smell of halwa, sweet and rich, filled the air. "Come, sit," my mother said, pulling out a chair for me. Eat while it's hot. I sat down, watching her as she served me like I was a guest in her home rather than her daughter. The halwa was perfect, exactly the way I secretly loved it, with extra almonds and just the right amount of cardamom. Thank you, Amy, I said, picking up my spoon. Is everything okay? She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes that made my breath catch. Was it love? No, that was ridiculous. She loved me in her way, I knew that. But this was different. This was the kind of look I'd seen other mothers give their daughters, the kind I'd spent my entire life pretending I didn't want. Aisha, she began, her voice trembling slightly. I need to tell you something. And I need you to try to understand. My stomach dropped. Whatever was coming, I knew it wasn't going to be good. Bad news always came with kindness first, like a spoonful of sugar to help the medicine go down. Beta, I haven't been a good mother to you, she said, and the words hit me like a physical blow. I know that. I've known it for a long time, but I didn't know how to fix it. I was so caught up in my own disappointment, my own shame, that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. Me, you don't have to. I started, but she held up her hand. Let me finish. Please. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. When you were born, I was so young, she continued, her eyes fixed on her lap. 20 years old, and I had just given birth to a daughter instead of the son everyone expected. Your grandmother called me useless. Your father's sisters told him he should divorce me and find a woman who could give him a son. I was alone, Aisha. So alone. Tears were streaming down her face now, and I realized with a jolt that I had never seen my mother cry. Not once, in 23 years. And I took that pain, she said, her voice breaking, and I let it come between us. I convinced myself that if I didn't love you too much, it wouldn't hurt as much when everyone reminded me that you weren't good enough. That I wasn't good enough. I built walls around my heart to protect myself, and I made you pay for my cowardice. Amy, the word came out choked. Let me finish, she said again, reaching across the table to take my hand. Her touch was warm and unfamiliar. I was wrong. So wrong. And I've been so afraid that it's too late, that I've already lost you. But yesterday, I saw you walking home from the market, and you looked so much like your grandmother, my mother, the one person who loved me unconditionally, and I realized that I had been given a gift. A daughter. A wonderful, brilliant, beautiful daughter. And I had thrown that gift away because of my own bitterness. Amy, you didn't throw me away, I whispered, tears now falling freely from my own eyes. You were always there. You took care of me. Caring for someone is not the same as loving them, she said firmly. And I haven't loved you the way you deserved. Not the way you needed. But I want to change that. I want to be the mother you should have had. I want to be your Amy, truly, in every way that matters. If you'll let me. The dam broke inside me. Years of suppressed emotion, of longing, of desperate need, came flooding out in a torrent of sobs. I was crying so hard I could barely breathe, and my mother, my Amy, rushed around the table and pulled me into her arms. I'm sorry, she kept saying, rocking me like a child. I'm so sorry, my daughter. My beautiful daughter. Forgive me. And in that moment I did. All the years of distance, of feeling like I wasn't enough, of wondering what was wrong with me, it all melted away in the warmth of her embrace. She was holding me, truly holding me, and I could feel her love radiating through the years of separation. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, both of us crying, both of us healing. When we finally pulled apart, she cupped my face in her hands and looked at me with such tenderness that I almost started crying all over again. From today, everything changes, she said. I'm going to be the mother you've always deserved. I'm going to be the mother my mother was to me. And I'm going to start by telling you the truth. The truth. I sniffled, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. The truth about our family, about who we really are. About why everyone has always been so disappointed in me, in us. And so she began to tell me a story that would change everything I thought I knew about my life, about my family, about myself. Hashtag Chapter 2, the secret that shaped our lives. My mother took a deep breath, and I could see her gathering her courage. The kitchen, which had felt so warm moments before, suddenly seemed charged with tension. "You know how everyone always talked about your father's family being so prestigious," she began. "The Hassan family, with their business empire and their connections. But what you don't know is that your father's success, it wasn't entirely legitimate." I felt my heart begin to race. "What do you mean?" "There were loans," she said carefully, "from people who aren't exactly bankers. People who expect repayment with interest and not the kind of interest you find in a bank." "People like who?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Moneylenders. The kind who break legs when payments are late. The kind who don't care about blood relations or family honor." The kitchen table suddenly felt very solid beneath my hands. "But we're okay, aren't we? We have the house, the car. We never went without." "We had appearances to maintain," my mother cut in, her voice bitter. "Your father couldn't let anyone know that he'd made mistakes, that his business was struggling. So we borrowed more, pretended more, and dug ourselves deeper into a hole." This was a side of my father I had never known. To me, he had always been the strong, silent provider, the man who left early in the morning and returned late at night, who kissed my forehead before bed and asked about my grades. I had never seen the stress, the worry, the fear that must have been eating him alive. "When did this start?" I asked. "Long before you were born," she said. "Your father was always ambitious, always wanted more. He was the youngest son, you understand. He had to prove himself. And when his elder brothers inherited the family business, he was left with very little. So he started his own ventures, but he was too proud to ask for help, too proud to admit when he was failing." "And the moneylenders," I said, a chill running down my spine. "They know where we live?" "Unfortunately, yes. The debt is substantial, and it's been growing for years. The interest alone is more than we can afford." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, suddenly terrified. "What's happened?" My mother's face crumpled. "Last week, they came to the house. 2 men, big men with heavy hands. Your father wasn't home. They said if we didn't come up with the money by the end of the month, they would start taking things. The car, the furniture, the gold jewelry you inherited from your grandmother. And if that wasn't enough..." She couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. I knew exactly what they were implying. In Pakistan, women are often used as collateral for men's debts. "Is Papa okay?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "He's terrified. He's been sleeping with a knife under his pillow. He won't leave the house. He won't even go to the masjid. He's so afraid of running into them." I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. Everything I thought I knew about my family was crumbling around me. The comfortable middle-class existence I had always taken for granted had been built on a foundation of debt and fear. "Amy, what are we going to do?" She took my hand again, her grip surprisingly strong. "Your father wants to sell the house. But it's not enough. It's not nearly enough. We would have to move, and we would have nothing left. The shame alone would kill him." "There must be something else," I said desperately. "Family, relatives, anyone who could help." My mother laughed, a harsh sound that didn't match her usual demeanor. "Your father's brothers? They've been waiting for this moment for years. They want to see him fail. Your grandmother, God rest her soul, always said we brought this upon ourselves. There's no one, Aisha. No one." I was about to respond when we heard the front door open. My father's footsteps, heavy and slow, made their way toward the kitchen. He appeared in the doorway, and I barely recognized him. The proud, composed man I had known my entire life looked broken. His eyes were bloodshot, his face unshaven, his clothes wrinkled. "Zara," he said, addressing my mother by her name for the first time I could remember. "Were you able to?" He stopped when he saw my tear-streaked face. "She knows," my mother said quietly. I told her everything. My father's shoulders sagged, and he sank into the chair across from me. He looked at me with such shame that I had to look away. "Beta," he began, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you have to hear this. I've failed you. I've failed all of you." Papa, it's okay, I said, reaching across the table to take his hand. It was the first time I had initiated physical contact with him in years. We'll figure something out. We'll. There's nothing to figure out, he interrupted. The money is gone. The business is gone. All that's left is this house and our pride, and the moneylenders are going to take both. I looked from my mother's tear-streaked face to my father's defeated posture, and something clicked inside me. For the first time in my life, I felt like an adult. I felt a surge of protectiveness, of determination. Tell me everything, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. From the beginning. Tell me about the debt, the business, the moneylenders. Everything. And so they did. For the next 3 hours, I learned the full scope of my family's predicament. My father's business had been struggling for years, propped up by increasingly desperate loans. He had borrowed from friends, from family, from banks, and eventually from men who didn't care about interest rates or repayment schedules. The total debt was staggering, more than 10 million rupees, with interest that was doubling every month. So we need to come up with at least the original principal, I said, trying to think clearly. That's the only way the interest stops. Yes, my father said miserably. But 10 million rupees. Where are we going to get that kind of money? I thought about it. My salary as a junior designer at an advertising agency was barely enough to cover my own expenses. My mother didn't work outside the home, and my father's business had officially been declared bankrupt. We had nothing to sell except the house, and that would only cover a fraction of what we owed. There has to be a way, I said firmly. There's always a way. Aisha Beta, my mother said gently, we've been trying to find a way out of this for years. There's no escape. We just have to accept our fate. No, I said, standing up so suddenly that my chair scraped against the floor. No, I refuse to accept that. I won't let these people destroy our family. I won't let them take everything we've worked for. They both looked at me with a mixture of surprise and something that looked almost like hope. Beta, my father said cautiously, what are you going to do? I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But I knew one thing for certain. I was done being a passive observer in my own life. I was done letting circumstances dictate my future. I was going to save my family, or I was going to die trying. I need to think, I said, heading for the door. I'm going to my room. I need to. I barely registered their concerned expressions as I walked away. My mind was already racing with possibilities, with plans, with desperate schemes that I knew were probably foolish. But I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. I had to try. In my room, I closed the door and leaned against it, taking deep breaths to calm my racing heart. The room felt different now, smaller somehow, more suffocating. The pink walls and stuffed animals I had cherished as a child now felt like a relic of a more innocent time. I walked to my desk and sat down, pulling out a notebook and pen. I started writing everything I knew, everything I had just learned, and every potential solution I could think of. The list was depressingly short. 1. Sell the house, not enough. 2. Borrow from family, not likely. 3. Get a second job, not enough time. 4. Find a wealthy benefactor, ridiculous. 5. Win the lottery, not a thing in Pakistan. 6. I stared at the page, feeling the hopelessness creep in. But then, like a ray of light cutting through storm clouds, an idea formed. What if I could start a business? Something small, something I could manage while keeping my day job. Something that could generate enough income to, at least, begin chipping away at the debt. I thought about what I was good at. I was a designer, yes, but that was already my job. What else? I had always loved cooking, especially the traditional recipes my mother had taught me, and in her distance, I'd spent many hours in the kitchen learning everything I could. I had also always had a knack for fashion, for putting together beautiful outfits that caught people's attention. But more importantly, I had something else. Something that my mother had given me in her own distant way. I had a network. I knew people from all walks of life. I had friends from college, from work, from the neighborhood, from my cousins' weddings. And in Pakistan, knowing people is often the most valuable currency of all. What if I could leverage those connections? What if I could build something from the ground up that would not only save my family but also give me purpose, give me direction, give me the life I had always secretly wanted? The idea was terrifying. Starting a business in Pakistan, especially for a young woman from a traditional family, was practically unheard of. There were so many obstacles, so many people who would tell me I was crazy, so many ways it could fail. But the alternative was letting my family be destroyed. I picked up my phone and called the one person I knew would understand. "Zara," I said when she answered, "I need your help." My best friend Zara and I had known each other since we were in primary school. She was the daughter of a successful businesswoman, and she had never let anyone tell her what she could or couldn't do. If anyone could help me navigate the treacherous waters of Pakistan's business world, it was her. "Of course," she said without hesitation. "What's going on?" I told her everything. The debt, the moneylenders, my parents' desperation, my own determination to find a way out. "Wow," she said when I finished. "That's a lot." "I know, and I need to do something, but I don't know where to start." "Meet me at the cafe on Main Boulevard," she said. "The one with the decent chai. We'll figure this out together." An hour later, I was sitting across from Zara at a small cafe, watching her expression shift from concern to excitement as I laid out my plans. "Okay, so what if you start with something small?" she said, leaning forward. "Something you can do from home. What about a catering business? You're an amazing cook. And with your design skills, you could make everything look so beautiful and professional." "I thought about that," I said. "But I don't have the capital for a commercial kitchen, and I can't afford to rent a space." "So don't rent a space. Use your own kitchen. I've seen people start food businesses from home. You just need a few good clients to get started." "And how do I get those clients?" Zara grinned. "That's where I come in. My mother knows everyone in the city. Rich people, influential people, people who would pay top rupee for good food and beautiful presentation. I can get you an introduction." "You would do that?" "Of course. That's what friends are for." I felt a surge of gratitude, so intense it almost brought tears to my eyes. "Zara, I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We have a lot of work to do." We spent the next 2 hours planning. Zara, with her business-savvy mind, helped me create a realistic budget, identify my target market, and develop a marketing strategy. She helped me name my business, Aisha's Kitchen, simple and personal, and designed a simple logo using my design skills. By the time we parted ways, I felt like I had a real chance. A small chance, but a chance nonetheless. When I got home, my mother was waiting for me in the living room. "Beta, where did you go?" We were so worried. "I went to meet Zara," I said, sitting down beside her. "Amy, I have an idea, and I think it could work." I explained everything to her, the catering business, the plan, the potential clients. She listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. "Beta," she finally said, "do you really think you can do this?" "I have to," I said simply. "For all of us." She looked at me for a long moment, and then she smiled, a real smile, the kind I had rarely seen from her. "Then I will help you," she said. "I may not have money, but I have time and skill and experience. I will help you cook, I will help you plan, I will do whatever it takes." I threw my arms around her, and for the first time, I felt like we were truly mother and daughter, partners, allies, equals. Together, we began to build a future. Hashtag Chapter 3, Building Dreams from Scratch. The first week of our new venture was chaos. Pure, beautiful chaos. My mother and I spent every waking moment we could spare in the kitchen. She taught me recipes I had never learned, the ones that had been passed down through generations in her family, the ones that she had never bothered to share with me because, as she later admitted, she hadn't thought I would care. But I did care. I cared deeply. We started small, with just a handful of clients that Zara had helped us secure. The orders were modest, a tray of samosas here, a batch of biryani there, but I poured my heart into every single one. I decorated the containers with hand-painted designs, included handwritten thank you notes, and made sure every dish was absolutely perfect. The response was overwhelming. "Your food is incredible," one client said, a wealthy businesswoman who had hired me for her daughter's engagement party. "The flavors are so authentic, so rich. And the presentation, it's like art." "Thank you," I said, beaming. "That means so much." "Tell me," she said, lowering her voice conspiratorially, "do you do weddings?" "My sister's daughter is getting married next month, and we're still looking for a caterer." I nearly fainted. A wedding? A real, proper Pakistani wedding with hundreds of guests and elaborate dishes and incredible pressure. "Yes," I said, before I could stop myself. "Yes, I do weddings." Later, when I told my mother, she looked at me with a mixture of pride and terror. "A wedding beta? Are you sure you're ready for that?" "I have to be," I said, trying to sound confident. "We need the money. And if I can pull this off, our reputation will be made." She nodded slowly. "Then we work harder. We work smarter. And we do not fail." For the next month, we lived and breathed wedding preparation. We planned the menu, sourced the ingredients, organized the team, mostly me, my mother, and a few cousins we had bribed with promises of payment and food. We worked from dawn until well past midnight, perfecting each recipe, fine-tuning each presentation. The night before the wedding, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. My mind was racing with all the things that could go wrong. What if the food didn't taste good? What if I got the quantities wrong? What if something burned, or spilled, or fell? "Stop it," I told myself firmly. "You know what you're doing. You've practiced everything 100 times. You're ready." But the doubts wouldn't go away. When I finally fell asleep, it was filled with nightmares of kitchen disasters and angry guests. The wedding day arrived in a blur of activity. We were up at 4 a.m., our kitchen transformed into a miniature factory. My mother was in her element, moving between pots and pans with the grace of a dancer. I handled the logistics, the timing, the presentation. The event was at a beautiful banquet hall on the outskirts of Lahore. When we arrived, the hall was already buzzing with activity. Decorators, florists, photographers, all rushing to prepare for the celebration. We set up our station in the back, close to the kitchen, and began the final preparations. The food needed to be perfect, the biryani fluffy, the kebabs juicy, the curries rich and fragrant. By the time the guests started arriving, we were ready. The wedding was beautiful, the bride radiant, the groom handsome, the families happy. And the food? The food was a sensation. "Who made this?" a guest asked, coming back for a third serving. "This is the best biryani I've ever had." "I need your card," said another guest, a wealthy businessman. "I have a party next week. I want you to cater it." By the end of the night, I had booked more than a dozen events. My mother and I were exhausted, covered in flour and oil and sweat, but we had never been happier. "We did it," I whispered to her as we packed up the last of our equipment. "We actually did it." She pulled me into a tight hug. "We did, Beta. And I couldn't be more proud of you." Hashtag Chapter 4, The Skeletons in the Closet. Just when things were starting to look up, disaster struck. It was a Tuesday, ironically, the same day of the week that had started this whole journey. I was in the kitchen, preparing for a weekend event, when my father came home early. He didn't say a word, just walked to the living room and sat down heavily on the sofa. "Papa," I called out, wiping my hands on my apron. "Is everything okay?" He didn't answer. I walked to the living room and found him staring blankly at the wall. His face was ashen, his hands trembling. "Papa, what happened?" He looked up at me, and I saw something in his eyes that made my blood run cold. Fear. Not the fear of the moneylenders, but something deeper, more primal. "Beta," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you years ago." I sat down beside him, my heart pounding. "What is it?" "Your mother," he stopped, took a deep breath. "Your mother isn't who you think she is. Our family, it's not what I told you." I felt the world tilt beneath me. "What do you mean?" "Your mother's family," he said slowly. They're different. from a different world entirely. Your grandmother, the one who always seemed so distant, she actually had a secret. A big secret. I remembered my grandmother, the stern woman who had seemed to disapprove of everything I did. The one who had never hugged me, never smiled at me, never treated me like a grandchild. What secret? I asked, dreading the answer. Your grandmother's second husband, my father said, his voice shaking. He was a powerful man, a man who had enemies. Enemies who would hurt anyone connected to him. And that's why we had to live like we did, always careful, always watching our backs. But that doesn't make sense, I said, confused. Why would that affect us? Because of who he was, my father said. Because of who his enemies were. And because of what they might do if they found out where we are. I stared at him. Papa, I don't understand. Your grandmother's second husband was a former government official, he said. A man who had access to certain things. Information, money, influence. And when he died, some people believed we had possession of those things. Things that could bring down a lot of powerful people. Things like what? Documents, my father whispered. Accounts, names, evidence of corruption. Things that had already destroyed several careers. Things that could destroy many more. The air left my lungs. And these people, they're still looking? Some are. Some never stopped. That's why your mother and that's why we built walls around ourselves. To protect you from all of this. To keep you safe from the shadows that have always followed our family. I don't understand why you're telling me this now, I said, my mind reeling. What's changed? Because I've been contacted by the moneylenders, he said, his voice cracking. But it's not what you think. They don't want the money anymore. They want something else. I felt a chill of dread. What? They want the documents. Documents? What documents? Your grandmother's documents, my father said. She left them to your mother. And they're somewhere in this house. But you said the moneylenders are just criminals. How do they even know about this? My father looked at me with haunted eyes. Because they're not just moneylenders. They're connected to the people who have been looking for those documents for decades. They know who we are, Aisha. And they're not going to stop until they get what they want. I stood up abruptly, my mind racing. We need to find the documents. Now. But why? We don't even know what they say. Because that's what the moneylenders want, I said, my voice shaking. And if they get them, they'll have power over us. They'll never leave us alone. So, we have to get to them first. The search began immediately. My mother, who had been listening from the doorway, joined us, her face pale but determined. We tore through the house, searching every room, every closet, every hidden compartment we could think of. Hours passed, and we were about to give up when my mother noticed something under the floorboards in the old storage room. She pulled up the boards and found a small metal box, covered in dust and rust. "This is it," she whispered. "This has to be it." The box was locked, but I managed to break it open with a hammer. Inside, we found exactly what my father had described. Documents, dozens of them, detailing a vast conspiracy of corruption and power that had been hidden for decades. As I read through them, I felt my blood run cold. The names, the dates, the evidence of crimes that had been covered up by some of the most powerful people in the country. This wasn't just a secret, it was a bomb. A bomb that could bring down entire families, entire dynasties. "Papa, you know what this means?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I know," he said, looking at me with a mixture of fear and determination. "It means we have a choice. We can use this to save ourselves. Or we can destroy them," I finished. In the weeks that followed, we decided to use the documents. We worked with a lawyer, someone my father trusted, to ensure our safety. We published the documents anonymously, online, in newspapers, through channels that would ensure they couldn't be ignored. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Powerful people fell. Families were torn apart. The very structure of power in Pakistan was shaken to its core. But through it all, our family stood strong. The moneylenders were exposed, their connections to the corruption laid bare. They had no choice but to leave us alone. And in the midst of all of this, something else happened. My mother stopped treating me like a daughter and started treating me like a partner, an equal, a friend. Beta, she said one evening, sitting beside me, I'm so sorry I never trusted you with the truth before. I thought I was protecting you, but I was just being a coward. Amy, it's okay, I said, taking her hand. I understand. Thank you for forgiving me, she whispered. Thank you for being the daughter I needed, even when I didn't know it. We sat together in silence, united by love and understanding. And in that moment, everything changed. Hashtag Chapter 5, The Power of Truth. The aftermath of the document leak was a whirlwind of chaos, fear, and ultimately liberation. The entire country seemed to be in shock. Government officials were resigning, criminal investigations were being launched, and people were being held accountable for crimes that had gone unpunished for decades. It was like a tsunami had hit the political landscape, and our family was at the epicenter of it all. But while the rest of the nation was dealing with the political fallout, our personal lives were undergoing their own radical transformation. The moneylenders, exposed and vilified, had retreated into the shadows. They had bigger problems now: investigations, lawsuits, public scrutiny. Our debt was suddenly the least of their concerns. We're free, my father said, the words coming out in a whoosh of air. For the first time in so long, we're actually free. He had changed, too. The heavy weight of shame and fear had lifted from his shoulders, replaced by something that looked almost like joy. He started going to the masjid again, reconnecting with old friends, laughing more freely. You did this, Beta, he said to me. You saved our family. No, Papa, I said, taking his hand. We did this. Together. Aisha's kitchen, meanwhile, was thriving beyond my wildest dreams. The publicity from the documents had brought our family to the nation's attention, and with it, my catering business had exploded. I was being contacted by everyone: celebrities, politicians, socialites, all wanting to hire me for their events. It was overwhelming, exhilarating, and terrifying. Slow down, Beta, my mother said one evening, watching me frantically answering emails and taking orders. You're going to burn yourself out. I can't slow down, I said, typing furiously. There's too much to do. The business will still be here tomorrow, she said gently. And the day after that. Please take a break. I looked up at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I felt my shoulders relax. You're right, I admitted. I'm scared, Amy. I'm scared that if I stop, it will all disappear. It won't, she said firmly, because you built it with love and hard work and talent. Those things don't just disappear. I laughed, feeling the tension drain from my body. When did you get so wise? Always, she smiled. You just weren't listening before. Our relationship had changed in more ways than I could count. The distance that had once existed between us had been replaced by warmth, by understanding, by a connection that I had never thought possible. We cooked together every day, not just for the business, but for ourselves. We shared stories, laughed, gossiped, argued. We became what we should have always been: mother and daughter, best friends, kindred spirits. And the secrets? The ones that had once been hidden? They